there are parts in our deep soul that have known our entire lives that we were destined for something big here, that we came with a big mission.
Welcome to Exploring the Edges. Let's get into it.
All right, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, welcome back.
After some technical difficulties this week, we are fully recorded in two separate locations.
Yeah, well, it's Mercury retrograde, so I can't talk, we can't record, so it should
It's
be
true.
interesting.
There's actually so many retrogrades. I have a feeling we're going to talk about that a little bit later in this podcast
Yeah.
after we get done talking about the artist's way. But week nine, week nine of the artist's way, I feel like we've neglected. I feel like we really neglected this week because we had so many changes happening. There was a lot of transportation and just a lot of timelines rupturing, and both of us sort of settling into our new location. Well, you're in the same location, but it feels a bit different now that yeah.
Yeah, it sure does.
So we just had a lot to navigate. And I think we did come to the morning pages a couple of times, but we didn't really spend the time that maybe we could have with the tasks in week nine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we missed 2 or 3 days of morning pages, maybe.
hmm Yeah, just to sort of overview what we did read in week nine, and we did read it,
Yes.
and yeah, we did reflect on it.
Hmm.
This week, week nine was talking a lot about sort of the emotional blocks that we might be encountering at this point in the artist's way. It's a 12-week journey, and so we're on week nine. And so feeling into this, what the artist calls, like I think a lot of times she says that people who are struggling with their creativity feel like they are lazy. And
Hmm.
so she's saying that instead of feeling into this like lazy artist, let's just call it what it is, which is fear.
Yeah.
And she talks about it being related to fear of failure, which I feel like is really easy to identify with. This fear of failure. We can even imagine what that feels like. If we design something and put it out and nobody watches it, nobody listens. We design something and offer and we put it out, nobody signs up for it. We can feel what that feels like in our body
Yeah.
and and also the fear of success, which I felt like it was so much harder for me to grab onto. I feel like I can't even imagine what that feels like in my body, which is probably an indicator that that's something that I need to work on and work through.
Yeah, maybe.
Like what would fear of success look like?
I don't know. I think it depends on like maybe it just depends on your personality because I think that even I have some fear of success that I think like squeezes through every once in a while. We've spoken about it before. I mean, even in terms of money, how it's easier
Mhm.
to talk about like, oh, I'm broke or just squeezing by than to be like, yeah, I got $1 million in the bank account and just
Mm,
trying to feel into like what that energy would feel like and to sort of make shifts in your body so that like abundance, financial abundance that can come in. And I think fear of success is maybe along a similar line, right?
mm,
Where then all of a sudden, maybe it shifts other people's perceptions of you. So some people have, like maybe some people have let go, like genuinely just don't care what other people think. And so that's going to remove some of the fear and other times it's going to change some of the relationships that you have, you know?
mm.
So I think
Yeah.
maybe there could be fear around that also in terms of success.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting to try to like feel it. And I do think that this is like some of the tasks that we really wanted to do from week eight that we didn't really get to do
Hmm.
was to sort of like name the dream. And it was followed up again this week in the tasks. And I think what's so hard about naming the dream right now in this particular week is that we are just right in the heart of eclipse season. And
Yeah.
and so even if, I think you and I had spoke about this earlier in this podcast, even, we had a very clear dream and we could name the dream and we've written about it, we've journaled. You and I held the same dream that we scribed before we even met.
Hmm.
And now sitting in the middle of this eclipse season, I'm not sure that I even I'm not sure that I even can feel into, the fullness of that dream right now. And so maybe part of that is the reason that we've put this off. But to circle back to what you were saying, maybe there is some value in terms of once you're able to name the dream and the author sort of asks you to like write it out in detail. Like, this is the dream. This is what it looks like. And even some exercises around like writing your perfect day. What does your perfect day look like? You wake up, you open your eyes, and you sort of, write this down. Maybe it would be helpful to feel into like, how are you perceived? Like, how are you perceived by others? Or what does your community think of you? Or what has happened to your close relationships? Because potentially you're right. Maybe that is part of the block around a fear of success, is that, you know, you might have to reevaluate some of your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Mm,
I think even like the questions around how are you perceived in your community, then adding on and how does that make you feel? Because
mm,
maybe you're an outcast in your community and maybe that's going to make you feel some kind of way, or maybe you're famous in your community and that's going to make you feel some kind of way. I feel like there can be big emotions around both things. And
yeah,
I keep thinking of like this example of, like if you're in a friend group and you're in the friend group for a long time and a lot of your interactions revolve around like food and, like having treats. Say you're always in a friend group that has like a dessert buffet once a month and everybody brings dessert and it's a big, huge dessert potluck. And all of a sudden, like you're not eating sugar. Or all of a sudden you realize that you have like this allergy that you didn't know you had. And then it shifts the entire relationship that you have with these people. And I
yeah,
think that you go through some of the same kind of emotions of like, well, how are they going to perceive me? Or maybe I don't want to overeat anymore. And there's like been this whole, persona that's, I ate too much and now I feel sick. And I feel like that can tie in with, even success in different ways. It's just a shift in perception of how you see yourself and then coming to terms with that, how others see you. What is that doing to the relationships that you've already had,
yeah.
Are they going to remain? Or are they not going to remain?
Yeah, I can really feel into that around like when I made the decision to stop drinking alcohol.
Mm,
And like, geez, like a lot of my friends, I used to work at a brewery, like a lot of the social activities that I had with that group of friends like revolved around like, getting together and going out and drinking. And yeah, just I guess I need to do some more work around fear of success. Yeah, I think this is really relevant astrologically because we're also in the heart of Venus retrograde. And
mm,
so Venus is all about receiving, receivership, and beauty, love, money, abundance. And so I think we are centered on some really important concepts, not just from the point of Venus retrograde or from the point of recovering your artist, recovering,
yeah.
creativity from the artist way, or eclipse season, you know, Mercury is retrograde, Venus is retrograde, Vesta's retrograde, Juno is retrograde.
Yeah.
There's all of these planets that sort of speak into this, your ability to receive and how you care outward. And I think it does tie into this idea of fear of success more so than fear of failure, because I think we can all identify what fear of failure looks like. It's people's perceptions of us, it's our self-worth. All of that is really easy to, how much of your self-value have you placed on your identity, and what does success look like? We can feel into all of that stuff. For fear of failure, it feels really easy, but fear of success feels so much harder for
Yeah,
me.
but at the same time, I think you can ask yourself the same questions. Like,
Mm,
what is your perception of yourself? How do you value yourself? Has it now changed because you're successful?
mm.
Was your identity wrapped up in being unsuccessful or just scraping
Oh,
by or just like all of these things, right? I feel
yeah. Victim
like,
identity.
yeah, and I think depending on where you are in your own journey and how much you've let go of, what other people think of you and how you sort of like see yourself and the ways that you identify in yourself, maybe that's going to add some blockages and maybe it's going
Mm,
to remove some blockages in terms of fear of success. Because if you, for example, like when you quit drinking, if you've already navigated some of these things, this fear of, like, how am I going to socialize with people? Do I care what they think about me? All of these things, it's like training for this, right? So maybe there's less
Yeah.
of that to let go of because you already feel like more centered in yourself. And maybe success because you're a famous author, because, the podcast takes off or whatever, maybe that's not where you're placing your identity. And I think
Mm,
that makes a difference too, like if you place your identity in being a teacher and then all of a sudden you want to get out of teaching, that's going to
sure.
be huge. But if you don't place your identity there, I think it's easy to move out of. Or if you place your identity in being a scientist and now, you're moving somewhere else, I think it makes a difference. Makes a
Yeah.
difference where you place your identity, your self-identity.
Yeah. And also interesting to consider, I think you and I, even our own personal journeys, have included a lot of past life regression and healing. We've really served as a mirror to one another in terms of these, past life blocks. And even in the work that we've been doing with the Four Winds Society with Alberto Velado, I think his name
Yeah.
is, who is running this neo-shamanism um, education platform. And I think it's interesting to feel into some of that territory. Like I think a lot of us, especially in the spiritual community, we've in the past taken a vow of chastity. We've taken vows of poverty. We have served in positions that did not require us to have independent wealth, outside of the community. So there are all these additional layers outside of this current time. And it feels like without exploring all of them, it's so hard to get a full picture of really what our blocks are around receiving.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, if you're generous, because even now to live to 100, that's something else, but like 1,000 years ago, I think you're lucky if you saw 30. But if you're generous, and you say I lived to 100 in every lifetime, or I was here every 100 years, like how many lifetimes is that? Because even if it's just from 0 to 2025, like that's massive, but it goes, as we all know, beyond 0. So
Sure.
I think there's things that we're carrying that we don't even realize. And I think that even in the workshop that we did this weekend, I had one experience where I couldn't get back to my family in time and they all died. And then I stopped following the path that I was supposed to be following that took me away from them to study and
Mhm.
to learn. And I think like there's residual fear there's residual fear and anxiety just around that you don't even realize that you're carrying in this life. And I think there's people everywhere that don't experience it. I'd never really heard of past life regressions or this kind of work. So
Sure.
many, many people who don't know and they're just carrying it. And so they have generalized anxiety. I don't know why I'm afraid. I don't know why I'm afraid. It makes no sense. Or, like I don't know why I'm afraid of X. It makes absolutely no sense. Well, maybe X really traumatized you like 2 lifetimes ago.
Yeah.
That's why you're afraid of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like it's facial hair freaks me out. Well, why? Oh, because, like, I don't know. That's not a good example for me, but I don't want to out some of my friends with some of their fears that they don't understand?
Hmm.
So it's just interesting to think about, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And
Yeah.
I think another one of the topics that was talked about in week 9 is this idea of she uses an example of horse racing, which
Yep.
I don't really love, but she says
Hmm.
that, if you have like a scared horse, like something that the jockeys do is sort of slip the scared horse's lead to like a more experienced horse who's used to racing. And
Yeah.
that sort of gives the newer horse some comfort. And so she paints this like, if you're trying to write a screenplay, like, do you know a screenwriter who's been successful? Like, can you reach out to them? If you are uncomfortable with getting an agent, like, do you know somebody with an agent? Can you talk to them about how they got the agent?
Hmm.
And I think for me, and maybe I haven't accessed the deepest parts of my creativity yet, but
Yeah.
it feels like for me, maybe, like maybe I need somebody who's Like maybe I want to talk to Chantress Seba, you know? Like maybe that's who I would like to talk to.
Yeah.
And I don't have any of that in my field, right? Like I don't have anybody who's sort of like channeling and singing and like vocalizing prayer and, connecting into the deep earth vibrationally and like, transmitting frequency. Like maybe that's the heart of my creativity. I don't have anybody like Chantress Seba in my field.
Yeah.
And so I do think, we could look at that and say, like, I don't have anybody in my field that I could slip my lead to, Or
Hmm.
we could look at it as a really clear invitation, an opportunity, something that we've recognized we do not have in our field. And
Yeah.
really taking a minute, coming into our center, getting intentional in our morning prayers or our evening prayers,
Yeah. Call it
however
in.
we yeah, however we manifest, whatever our manifestation practices are, like calling it in. And many times in my life I have called in teachers, I've called in teachers, especially when there's been an exodus of people that I used to look up to as teachers falling away. It's creating space. And I've called in the teachers. And so I think it could be a really powerful practice, even if you're not looking to write a screenplay or
Yeah.
start a band or become a Renaissance painter or whatever, whatever the creative dream is,
Hmm.
to call in those teachers, to call in that support, to call in the mentors.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we were guided to talk about today is this idea of reciprocity,
Hmm.
such that both parties win. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes in the maybe I don't want to say this word because I feel like it's so cliche, but like maybe in the wounded energy of calling in a teacher or a mentor, we might think like, like, but what does that mentor really have to gain? And like, are they really gonna want to give me their time? And what would I give them in exchange, and it's lack mentality.
Hmm.
And so I think a better exploration of that avenue is this idea of reciprocity, that both parties are going to gain something from that. And it's a beautiful mirror of, the work that you and I have done together, because in many ways we are both more experienced in different areas.
Yeah.
And I think like changing that mindset into this, reciprocity, that it's win-win. It's win-win for everybody. Whoever you're calling in to mentor you in this part of your life, they might be calling in a mentor for that part of their life that you can help them with.
Yeah, or maybe even they're looking to pass on their knowledge, which is also a gift to them. It's
Sure.
interesting. It's interesting that this card came up um because I was just when I was scrolling Instagram, just it wasn't somebody I followed, but this woman came up on my feed and she said that she was in Bali and she met this shaman in Bali and just started working with him, and she kind of talked about her story and how he talked about how she was learning more quickly than other people and things like that. But the main takeaway in terms of our conversation is this reciprocity, and she was really called to ask him to be her teacher, and he agreed, and he wouldn't take any money because he also felt called to teach her. So,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's interesting, I think, when you're ready, the people that cross your path and who you're able to call in, and maybe they're calling in the same thing, you know? And I
sure.
and I know other people who are doing many different teachings and they're hitting a point in their life where they're getting older and they want to pass these teachings on. It's a part of their legacy. And
Mm.
so you're not always taking by being a student, you know? Sometimes you're giving by being a student.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Something that I feel very deeply called to do is mentor,
Hmm.
to find people who are just sort of starting on the beginning of their path and really providing like a safe space holding, for people to really dig deep into their truths.
Yeah,
And
for
it's
sure.
separate from energy work or, intuitive rebirth or any of that. It's just really, feeling called to be. And part of that is this podcast, feeling like we're laying down a foundation that
Yeah.
someone even years from now might come stumble upon our conversation and really feel encouraged and supported. And that feels so good in my soul.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I always ask before we start that it reaches like the person or people that really need to hear the message. Because even if it's just one person, then it's totally worth sitting down and doing this, you know? And and I think that you're really good at it. You're really
Thank
tuned
you.
in. You're good at knowing like what people need to hear when and
Mm,
when they need to like push through and do it themselves. You're very, very good at it. So it's for sure
thanks.
gonna happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're
And
welcome.
I think maybe this is even where we can move out of the part of this podcast that's centered around the artist way,
Yeah.
because we are looking forward to week 10. I'm sure we're going to sort of, now that we're settled into our new routines, we're going to dive back into this work,
Yeah.
especially after the 29th, the other part of the eclipse. Maybe we'll be able to really start writing down the
Yeah.
dream. But the direction that I wanted to move in this conversation is sort of around the idea that we are moving into a time of destiny, a time that has been prophesized by traditions and, you know, indigenous native peoples, all
All
of
over
them,
the world.
all of them, yeah, have talked about this time where we're going to be coming more into balance.
And like this shift that's happening, this split that's happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I thought what might be relevant for this conversation, just based on what's been, in our fields, is this idea that we are moving into a time where things that we previously did not think were possible are possible. And
hmm
just a quick example of this, I think like, the telepathy tapes, which are very popular right now. And you and
hmm
I couldn't really get into those just because of the style of the recording, but
Yeah.
and also I think potentially because we weren't riveted by this information. Like, of course, telepathy exists. And I
Yeah.
think we've experienced it a lot in our relationship. I think sometimes we maybe think we might be, sharing that twin flame telepathy. But you and I have experienced that in our relationships. And so we weren't like shocked by this revelation. We didn't need to be convinced. And so perhaps it lost some of its flavor. But the telepathy tapes are big. I think like telekinesis is coming into our field, and it's something that, I tried to do as a kid because I believed that I could.
Sure. I mean, I don't know about you, but I saw Matilda and my sister, and it was just like this. Yes. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I think we are coming into this time, and, it's interesting if we really feel into, there are parts of our deep soul for everyone who's potentially in our community. There are parts in our deep soul that have known our entire lives that we were destined for something big here, that we came with a big mission, a
Mm.
larger than life mission, something that felt like it didn't fit with our reality when we were children.
hmm
And so if we reach into that deep place in our hearts and we nurture that, we know that it's time now, that we're being prepared now. We're getting ready to do that now.
hmm
And I think when you speak into this community of, light workers or seers, shamans, healers, medicine keepers, we call each other different names, but we are part of this collective web.
Yeah.
And I think the general sense is that, like, now is the time, and we are getting ready, we're getting prepared, we're getting downloads, especially in this time now, in this eclipse period. The messages have been coming in, and so I think it's really important to start to imagine that things that we previously thought were impossible are in fact possible, and they're part of our medicine. This is the direction that we're moving in, that we really need this community around us so that when we're in these deep dreaming states, and we're saying like, I think it's possible that maybe I could, maybe I have telepathy skills, or, I can move objects with my mind, or I
hmm
can, shape the elements, or I have prophetic dreams, or there's so many flavors and so
Yeah.
many lenses of the gifts and the medicine that are coming online now. And it's not coincidental. There's no coincidence that it's all happening now, because this is the destined time that we're moving into.
Yeah.
And so if you're met with you're crazy lady and here's some Prozac, then
Yeah.
then this is going to be really detrimental to your journey as a light warrior. And
Exactly.
we really need everybody at this time to like really fully come into their power because we don't know what's coming ahead. We just know that this time has been foretold.
Yeah, and it loops right back into the chapter when it comes down to fear. And I think
Mm,
like you if you can get to a place where you're not afraid of success, what other people are going to say because it's all linked in.
mm,
Because if you can really own it and not worry about what other people are going to say, then I feel like you have a higher chance of success and a higher chance of developing any skills that you have, any medicine that you have, because it's all outside of the box and it's really hard for people um to work outside of the box, you know?
yeah. And then I think there are different layers, like sometimes it's easier for me to hold some of these radical ideas that I have with
Mhm.
complete strangers, right? Like I can talk the talk with strangers all day. And
Yeah.
then when it comes to like people you really care about and you know what views they hold, it gets so much harder, it's so much harder to talk the talk.
Oh yeah,
And
well they've already put you in a box, right? So
Mm.
you can be whoever you want with strangers.
Yeah, but especially like it almost feels like if you know what someone's view is, it's harder, like because you can hold your own. I feel like it's just harder to be vocal about it. And maybe that's just something that I'm working through now,
Yeah,
part of the
pretty
teaching
normal.
that I'm sitting in.
Yeah, it's pretty normal, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big one. It's a big one. There's a lot coming in, and I think no matter what it is, and I think even if people don't realize that it's medicine, I think it's all kind of flooding in now, you know? Um, and I think that the things are coming in are probably important. And if they feel good, then I think that maybe if something's coming in for you, no matter what it is, and it feels good, it's not hurting anybody, it's worth leaning into. Like you and I have both been feeling like a little bit more of a push to start exercising. Again, like no real reason, maybe health benefits, but also just like this motivation that kind of has come out of nowhere. And I think maybe there's people that feel like they need to read a certain book, and there's people that feel like they need to create art and they've never created art before, and there's people that feel like they want to make music and they've never made music before. And I think if these things are starting to come in, just do them because maybe your art, you're going to post it and it's going to touch somebody or it's going to help somebody and it's going to trigger something like sort of like this chain reaction, you know? So I think it's not necessarily for everybody that they feel like, oh, I can, move this pencil across the table with my mind. Maybe some people are feeling that right now, you know? But maybe
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I really feel like I need to get strong, or oh, I feel like I need to cut sugar, or oh, I feel like I need to step away from this, or I feel like I need to move away from the city into the country, or whatever it is. I think if it's not hurting yourself and it's not hurting others, that it's definitely worth exploring, especially at this time. I think it always is, but I just feel like it's a really big time.
Yeah, I do too.
Mm,
And I wish that because I hear what you're saying and I want to challenge you a little bit because I do think that sometimes when we start to serve ourselves, we are hurting others,
mm,
and that's when it gets really hard is because, we feel that we need to go in a different direction. Like perhaps we're feeling like we really need to study yoga in India as an example. We've like saw an offering, we know who's running the teacher training, we really feel obligated to go. But we maybe have like an elderly family member that depends on us, or a dog, or there's it feels like there's so many possibilities. And I'm not saying that you should ditch your grandma and give your
yeah.
dog up for adoption, and I'm not advocating that at all.
No, no, no.
But but it could be possible that like maybe your dog could stay with your sister for 6 weeks, like go and do
Yeah.
it. Like there it does feel like, we're always, when we step outside of a version that we used to be, we're always sort of hurting the people around us because they're having to transition, they're having to shift, they're having to grieve that version of us that they used to know, that they used to love. And
Yeah.
it's the same grief that we go through. We process in the rebirth process, the death comes and we grieve that old life that we had, that old comfort, the old safety,
Yeah.
the ease. We grieve it all.
Oh, yeah.
And it's felt deeply by everybody that we know, everybody
Mm.
that loves that version of us has to go through that grief process as well. And so I do think it's a part of the rebirth process is
Yeah. Yeah, it's a biggie. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Grief is hard. Grief is a
mm,
hard one. But I feel like in some ways, if you're not being true to yourself, that you're also hurting, you're also hurting the people that you care about and who care about you. So they can't actually see you. I don't know. It's complicated.
or even the further truth after that is that, you know, some of the people that are around us when our self dies are gonna get to know the new version of us that rises. And
Hmm.
some of them are not. But there are some people who are waiting for that new version of us to be born. This like next generation of soul family, of destined soul
Yeah.
contracts, of of intended meetings, people who are waiting for us to come into our more full, our more authentic expression. They're waiting on us for us to be born. And so we can hold grief for what's lost,
Yeah.
but we also destiny, it's destiny.
Yeah, destiny is a big one.
Yeah, we will never meet them unless we're willing to die to the old.
Yeah. Yeah, this is true.
Do we believe that all of our best days are yet to come? Or do we believe that our best days are behind us?
Mm. Yeah. Oh, so many big questions.
Well, we're not going to solve them now because we're in the heart of eclipse season and almost
Yeah,
every
everyone
planet is
buckle up
retrograde.
and just hold on tight.
Yeah, or don't hold on tight,
Yeah.
Jen. It's the thing, release the grip.
Yeah.
It's okay to let yourself waffle a bit.
Yeah. Just go on for the ride.
Yeah, for this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Just let go and Godspeed. Maybe you'll get blown out of the roller coaster and maybe you won't.
Maybe you are the roller
Maybe you
coaster.
are. Maybe you're yeah. I don't know. I have this quote from The Artist Way, and I feel like, yeah, maybe it will help. And then it'll tie things back into The Artist Way. So we'll do our best. But she wrote in this chapter, and it's about artist blocks. And again, like when we were talking about the beginning, not to call it laziness and call it fear,
Mm.
call it what it is. And she wrote, fear is what blocks an artist, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not finishing, the fear of failure and of success, the fear of beginning at all. There's only one cure for fear. That cure is love. And that
Mm.
really stuck out to me. And I feel like it's for the artist way and it's for the time that we're in right now and, everything else. So, yeah.
It's a fundamental teaching.
Hmm.
And my own personal ideology, this is what I know is true. There's only fear and love, and that is it.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
self-love.
week 10 says that we're going to be recovering a sense of self-protection.
Perfect.
So, yeah, so we're going to be talking about toxic patterns and perils, which I'm sure it's going to be medicine, but it feels hard to anchor into anything right now because of what's happening astrologically. But, hopefully
Yeah.
we'll be able to dig our teeth into that now that the dust has settled a bit. Get
Yes.
back into our routines, our morning pages, and our commitment to the artist way.
Yeah. Oh, thanks everybody for coming out and hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.